His theory, essentially, it boils down to a really simple notion, which I think we can all agree to. And he was amoral about that. And what that means is the act of gaining power in order to be able to use it is the currency in politics. If you do not want that, then choose to not play the game. But if you don't play the game, that means you choose to lose it, because that's how the game works. And so, in other words, either you play politics or you stop whining.
Hello, welcome to another wonderful episode of Agile Actually. Today, Hinch and I are joined by our good friend and colleague, Laurens Bonnema. Laurens is an absolute legend in the space of leadership, product, agile, blah, blah, blah. For his sins, he's a very European man. We can claim just about 20 nationalities to a name, and he can speak most of the languages as well.
Well, it's not that many languages, but no, it's a nice introduction. Thank you very much.
And Hinch, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. It's been a bit of a stressful week. I've been recording stuff, so same as today.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So deja vu all over again.
Exactly. Except there's more people here, so that's a little bit better.
Excellent. So more people to play with. We like that.
Yeah.
And Laurens, the reason we dragged you in is you mentioned in the PST chat group. I'll read it out because it just blew my mind. We're talking about stakeholder collaboration, organizational awareness, management, politics. And you said that you use Hans-Jürgen Morgenthau's take on realism tempered with idealism in the context of political economy of organizations.
Yeah, as a bit of an aside and historical background to this, I wasn't always an Agile coach and professional Scrum trainer. Before I went into actually working for a living, I was a student of political economy. And I thought at that time I would eventually become a diplomat, or like preferably higher up person working at the European Commission or whatever. That was what I was studying for. And as part of my education, they really, really grilled me in politics, and then not like your average everyday politics, but like real politics. And part of that was the theory of politics. And one of the great theoreticians used to be Hans-Jürgen Morgenthau. It's not a new name. And his theory, essentially, it boils down to a really simple notion, which I think we can all agree to, that all politics boils down to a struggle for power. And that is a very realistic way to look at it. And he was amoral about that. And what that means is the act of gaining power in order to be able to use it is the currency in politics. If you do not want that, then choose to not play the game. But if you don't play the game, that means you choose to lose it, because that's how the game works. And so, in other words, either you play politics or you stop whining, which to my proclivities immediately sounded like, yeah, exactly. Either play the game and play it to win, or stop whining about it. And he did something beautiful to this notion of like sheer brutal realism by then stating, of course, you have to temper it with idealism, because otherwise you're just being is this by the way a clean podcast or not? Good, because I was going to say otherwise you're just an asshole.
You be you.
And personally, I have a quite strict no asshole rule. And that means that I was not really looking for non-idealistic politics, but I was noticing that the politicking I was doing was hindered by idealism. And turning that on its head, saying, good, doing power plays for power's sake, recognizing that that's part of the game, and then using that for good, that sounded like a pretty obvious idea to me, but also a nice thought exercise because it allowed me to think of politics as a game and then play the game while not being an asshole. And that's the challenge for me since then. Of course, I've built on it because normally when you're in a corporate environment, the politics that is being played there is, I mean, not that serious. It's pretty straightforward, but it's good to know that it's there, right? And when you once you have more than 50 people working together in some way, shape, or form, you will have politics as defined by Hans-Jürgen Morgenthau, because you will always get a struggle for power. It could be a mild struggle. It could be a easily negotiable struggle, but usually there is a sense of struggle, and I like that.
I challenge that, Laurens. I reckon 3 people. As soon as you've got more than 3 people working towards something, there is elements of politics coming in.
And so it happens quite fast. And what I liked about the thought exercise they had us do in college or university or whatever, they made us practice with opinions that were definitely not our own. Right, my background is my mother is Colombian, and we're at least, so I feel like at least half South American. And they had me defend the American Cuba policy. And that was on purpose because they knew that that was not my personal opinion. And that was really, really good because it forced me to truly think, why is this beneficial? But also, how do you sell it? And that practice is something I can still use today. And then, of course, I'm doing it with a different purpose, right? Helping people consider Scrum as their next framework to get stuff done in a way that makes them feel like it was their idea all along, because otherwise I end up selling, and I don't like selling.
Yeah.
I was, when you were talking there, I was thinking about a thing I was listening to the other day about debate. And it was basically saying that if you want to truly debate something, you have to, like, 2 people are going to debate it. They both have to go research each other's topics thoroughly so that they understand the other person's topic, and then they can have a debate. Otherwise,
that's exactly
each other.
what they had us practice with. And talk about 2 people. With politics and with power, you have a similar thing that you have with another favorite topic between 2 people. I think it was, let's remember the name here, Rosabeth Moss Cantor. Nobody knows her, I think, not if you're not heavily into politics, but she has a quote that I just Googled for this interview. Power is a dirty word. It's easier to talk about money, and it's much easier to talk about sex than it is to talk about power. And people who have it, they deny that they have it, and people who want it, they do not want to appear to hunger for it, and people who engage in its machinations tend to do so secretly. And the thing I changed there is I always say it out loud. I love politics. I love that game. I am into it. I play it freely. Of course, I lose a lot because playing openly is not a winning strategy. But it matches my personal proclivities. Okay, I like to teach people that this is a game, and it's a very important one because it determines to a large extent how you can live your life.
I've got a whole load of thoughts popping off in my head because I think politics, it's essential to understand it. If we're going to work with organizations and people, we need to appreciate their political organizations. And there's lots of works on politics And as soon as you get into these larger organizations, particularly the global Zaibatsus, they're really big places where we're talking 9 zeros. Politics is really hardball there. If you work with a government department, it's even more subtle. It's a well-polished game, right? If you start working with civil service, government departments, etc., it's very polished. My thinking then goes back to the ancients. And this is where I find the works of Sun Tzu, The Art of War, very useful. And if you tie that with the writings of Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and the stoic approach of living a good life, I think that's where you end up with the ruthlessness of combat tempered with the idealism of stoicism and
if you
living a good
combine
and productive
all that
healthy
together,
life.
you get to The Prince by Machiavelli, right? So the book he wrote to advise, I think it was one of the Borgias, and the key thing though, as much fun as it is to read about the past, today the same thing happens all the time. People are they all look for like sources of power. Sometimes they don't even know they have it. That's actually one thing I tell students in my Scrum classes. A lot of them don't seem to realize that they too hold power, right? They have either knowledge, sometimes positional power, sometimes power that they don't even know that they can use, with the knowledge that they have, or the fact they, with just a little bit of concerted effort, they could like really rebel with a team in a way that doesn't get them axed, but it gets them what they ask for. Because in the end, that's why I'm in it, right? So I'm not in it to become really powerful myself. If I was in that, I would not actually be talking about it. I would be one of the people that really, really covets it and therefore is silent. But I like explaining this to people, because it's really, really simple once you know that there's only a couple of sources of power in any organization. In a nation, you can see that, and yes, it becomes a subtle game of politicking, mostly because they've done it for hundreds of years. And if you do something for a long time, you get better at it. But in a lot of young companies, it's still a bit of a new thing. But the one that you see every day is the power to mete out resources, right? If it's my team, if my team gets bigger, then I'm better, right? You even have agile frameworks that make bigger teams a thing, and then you become a bigger Scrum Master if you have a team of teams as opposed to just one team. And brilliantly, that actually makes perfect sense to me, right? So I'm not even attacking that. I do know that I'm skidding past a flame war with Hinch here. But the key thing here is meeting out resources is actually a power play. So to amass that power is logical to want. It's also really, really logical from an agile perspective to want to distribute that as much as possible, because all that power corrupts, and it does. So there's a tension always between dividing it, spreading it, and amassing it. And the most classical way to get it and to make sure that people fall in line and do what you want is being able to shape behavior through reward and punishment, right? So the classical managerial way to wield power, usually associated with positional power, like actually being called a manager, and that is really combined with the meeting out resources. But the meeting out resources that I mentioned is actually something that if we're talking people, um, even if you call them resources, then they can do something that no other resource can, which is rebel while still following the rule, right? Just do a little bit less hard work for the person who isn't worth it than they do for somebody who, in their opinion, is. And that is actual power that people often don't use or are unaware of that it's an option to use. And exactly,
It's the
yes.
power of the union,
And
right? The
all
right
that
to
history
withdraw
comes
labor.
into like Scrum, Agile in general, in a very real sense. To my mind, the political economy of Agile transformations is the redistribution of power, quite radically democratizing. Yes, that was it. Democratizing it.
Democratizes.
And usually that kind of revolution is quite bloody, and I find Agile approaches are uniquely suited to making that less painful as opposed to more painful. And that is amazing.
The difficulty in organizations that rely on power for how they function is that who's going to sponsor that transition away from power? It's like in politics, why it's very difficult to change the system, because the system created the power that the people that can change the system have. So they don't want to change the system because they would then lose some of their power. So how do you convince people in the organization who have the power that it's a good idea to give some of it up?
I think it was alluded to, and where we've seen it when Agile grows organically, be it Scrum, be it Kanban, be it XP, whatever, a team that starts delivering and smashing it out of the park, delivering more value, demonstrating more outcomes, the leader that supports that can use that column of pressure to rise up the organization.
And it's easier to control because it's less people. A highly motivated team that is very, very productive, and loves the fact that they're allowed to be that productive, will be very loyal too. And it's actually, if you look back at like The Art of War and Caesar and treatises that they wrote, that's exactly what they did to create the best armies in the world, right? They always advanced on multiple fronts. They made the first move. They made sure to co-opt their antagonists and also to remove rivals nicely if possible, but remove them in some way, shape, or form. And all of that is all true also for Agile transformations, and usually in a very nicer way than just killing them, obviously. But just say you have interference from a manager who not just doesn't get it, but really has an interest in you not succeeding with your teams. Then you either co-opt him, in other words, make him responsible for the thing you're supposed to make a success of, which is actually a really good move. Because most managers, they just do their job, the one that is assigned to them, the thing that they need to be successful in. And if they are then made head of Agile, it's like you flip a switch in their conviction. All of a sudden, they will be the most ardent promoters of it. So that's actually something I look for. Who is most well adept at playing politics here? I tell them what Simon just said. Just imagine the power you can amass by having teams that are this good, and this is how you create them. They then either become the people who promote it, or they get maybe a hint of an awesome job elsewhere that they could take from their boss. And that usually is actually a nice way to get rid of somebody without having to destroy them, without having to be nasty about it, without having to do any of the things we usually associate with like bad politics. But it's still a power play, right? If I were to, let's say I wanted to become a really, really awesome PST, and there's two people on this call that are in my way because you're doing a better job than I am, even though we all wear glasses and we all have short hair. Arguably, Martin has the shortest hair of all, so that's better. We all have beards, so what's not to like, right? But still, you're better than me. I hate that, so I want you to do something else. If that is what I'm truly into, I could try to destroy your reputation and all the evil thing that we usually associate with politics, and that's actually something you also see online mostly, right? So that's like LinkedIn nowadays. But but yeah, exactly. Or you start Agile 2.0 or whatever. Just make sure that you have your thing
So
so that I
product
can say
management,
my thing is
Lawrence,
better than yours. And that's a strategy, but it's a non-inclusive strategy. It's win-lose. So for me to win, you have to lose. And in my opinion, that's like in terms of politics, that's amateur hour. The way to really win is to have you join me in my march to awesomeness. And usually the fastest way to have you join me is me joining you. So you don't know that you're joining me. And I become the person who is helping you better than anyone else, the best second person you've ever had on your team. And before you know it, you're nudged into what I want you to do. And that's not evil because I'm actually helping, right? So I really am helping you attain your goals. But over time, it feels more like we're doing this together. It's more like we're actually becoming a team. Now, if you think, yeah, but isn't that what Agile is supposed to be anyway? Yes, exactly. So you're not doing anything wrong if you do this way. And that's something that I find fascinating in the study of how politics really works, that it provides those really clear paths that then all of a sudden make a ton of sense. And the reason I like it is because it gives me the, how do you call that? It makes me also want to spend the time to get that done, because usually I'm impatient. And these things that I'm now talking about, they can take years, right? So, or at least months, never weeks. Yeah.
No, it
Yes.
means the juice is worth the squeeze, and you're actually living the agile values. So you're not damaging your integrity by moving. So find the person who has the most influence. They may be the most nervous about the thing. Help them appreciate that by really championing the transformation, they become in control of the transformation. Partner with them, deliver the transformation. Everyone looks good. Or they think, nah, this is not for me. They exit. Find the next person who wants power.
Mm-hmm.
Wash, rinse, repeat. And it's great when I've seen it a huge success when the
Yeah,
CEO's like,
and actually
let's get
that's a
after
thing
this.
in change management, right? That's what they call executive support, which is also known as cheating, right? Because it makes it easier, and that cheating is, and I say that in jest, because that's of course not cheating at all. It used to be that we thought in project management, because I'm a recovering project manager, that you were cheating when you had a dedicated team that worked on nothing but your product. And now we call that a sprint goal and a product goal. And we call those teams Scrum teams. Of course, there's more to it than that. But in a very real sense, in project management, we used to call that cheating because it made it easier. And in my and to my mind, it's like,
Well, you
well,
had
it could
dedicated
also just
people.
be easier, right? Instead of cheating. Uh, and when you know something way easier to get the job done, why don't you just do that? It's like the sharpening the saw syndrome in lots of time management books, popularized by Franklin Covey, and that's also what power is, right? So it's a sharpened saw instead of a dull one. If you know how to get it and you know how to wield it well, it's still your decision which tree you're gonna work on. But it's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for evil, but also for good. I tend to think that instead of just playing games for game's sake, I play the game to help make life better for people. And I actually phrase it very big. So I create a world of work that we would want our kids to live in. So in a very real sense, that really is how I look at the job I do. That's why I'm a PST. That's why I help people get really good at Scrum, because when my son gets to an age where he's going to work, I would much prefer him to work in an organization that uses Scrum and uses it well, with the kind of power play that is out in the open and understandable, as opposed to hidden and evil, and based on dominance as opposed to ideas.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
a healthy meritocracy, right? And working with the CEO is just good common sense, because I think everybody forgets about the golden rule of business. And it's a very simple rule. Whoever's got the goal makes the rules. It's very, very simple. And it hasn't changed since, tokenist economies, gold was invented.
Yeah.
And there's two books that I've read in the last few years that have really refined my thinking on this. A while ago, I read The Dictator's Handbook, which you think, what are you reading that for? Because it's a very interesting exploration of power, and it says there's no such thing as a democracy or a dictatorship. It's just power. And it depends upon the three levels of selection of who's guiding it. And we can see it in organization, and explains it. And the second one I finished recently is from a chap called Robert Greene, The 48 Laws of Power. And it's a fascinating book, because it just describes, here's a law of power, here's an example, here's a positive example, here's an exception to the rule, and just goes through these 48 laws. And if you understand it, it makes it positive and helps you work with organizations. And the thing I love in your final statement there, or your last statement, is doing it in a way that made it transparent and explicit, so that we can then utilize these laws and take this power game and bring it out into the open, and to help guide people to use it in a constructive, positive way. So yes, there is a game of power here. It's called customer value and outcomes. We can demonstrate this through evidence-based management, and we'll all work together to shift the needle.
Yeah, and you
using
must
the
learn
Scrum
about that,
values.
because
That's the
any
power game.
organization is optimized for the current status quo, including its power distribution. And when you come in to change anything, even if you're not looking to make it more agile, it's that whatever change you want requires a redistribution of that power. In other words, toppling, really changing the current structure. And there you'll meet organizational gravity, right? So organizations always veer back to the state they had before, because that's what they're optimized for. So it's really, really hard to change anything meaningfully unless you get the gold. And therefore, you're looking for the gold. Nowadays, fortunately for us, the gold is knowledgeable people who are able to do great work. And if you have those, and you can create those, and there is a larger concentration in your part of the organization than anywhere else, you get more power because you have more gold. It's still the same thing. That's really good to know, because the first thing that happens when you have a lot of gold, what's the first thing that comes to mind, Martin? If I'm sitting on top of a stack, if I'm sitting on top of a stack of gold and you see me sit there,
wow,
yeah, probably they're not going to ask,
come
right?
and ask
They're
you
just
for
going
some
to take
gold.
it. And that's what happens with successful teams as well, right? So you have these successful teams, you must have been cheating. Give me some, right? So they're going to redistribute those wonderfully crafted, awesome teams, and essentially destroying them by making sure that power disappears. And that is one of the reasons to play that power game, because you must at all costs avoid that from happening, because then you lose, right? So then, because that is your goal. So it's in a very real sense good to look at what that real power basis is. And in modern organizations, it tends to be knowledge workers, but people who can do the job, and who get better at getting better faster than anyone else, because that is the key thing.
So that ability to learn, ability to deliver. So we come into an organization, they've said, hey, you're awesome. Come and help my organization be awesome. We find the most cynical leader who has currency, people, kit, etc. Make them the head of Agile. We then work with them to support the adoption. We help create teams that are capable of delivering. We cultivate really effective, true Scrum Masters, people who will tackle organizational impediments, not people who, they're really effective. They help craft the teams, they challenge the organizations, they get rid of the impediments. If the organization isn't willing to help with that, excellent, we can leave and go and help somebody who's serious about it. Great. So that's an exit criteria. That happens. They then start delivering better stuff, solving organizational problems, better customer value. That grows. Your leader's currency then grows. You then can ripple that out through the organization, but protect the team. So be mindful that if you have a high functioning team, splitting them out or, creating, say we've got 7 people in a really high performing team, putting those 7 people into 7 new teams may not be your best growth strategy, right?
Yeah, but also just realize that that response of trying to negate that usually is not even out of evil intent. I hardly ever find that when I ask the people that then start to destroy everything again, that it's almost never out of malice. It's always out of genuine concern. And I like the metaphor there of let's say that you're used to a certain amount of traffic in a city, and therefore you know that a certain speed limit helps to make sure that that you don't have that even though it's congested, the traffic keeps flowing, right? That's what that's what speed limits are really for. Now let's say that you want to go faster, so you want to go through that traffic at speed with a car full of awesome people. Even in real life, for that to truly work, you would need flashing lights and a siren and some extra power and some executive support for you to be able to do that, as opposed to everybody who can't. Um, so, in order for you to break the normal rules and go faster than anyone else, you have to have that level of support. But also, if everybody were to do that, it wouldn't work. And that's something I struggle with because, in a very real sense, I consider really awesome, effective Scrum teams as like the special forces of an organization. And if all the forces are special, then it's not special anymore. And I'm not saying that because it's bad for those forces, but it doesn't make sense for everybody to work that way, right? So not all of the things that you're looking to achieve
But
must have that level of focus, attention, and speed, and quality, and also intensity of work. And I think it would be good to also have a little bit of a discussion with people there. Like, what kind of balance are you looking for in your organization? How could we achieve that? Also, to make it feel more safe. And then to come back to the traffic metaphor, essentially create a lane for the really fast stuff where you have every now and then you see um, people whiz by very, very rapidly, and the rest is just cruising, and that's okay. Because usually the fear is, yeah, but if I have to learn to drive that fast, I really don't like it. I don't see why it's necessary. And usually they're right. In their case, it's not necessary. And that, of course, makes you want to throw your car in front of the one speeding, even though maybe they're right to do so. So you must have a conversation around that. And that also is a very important way to distribute power and to politic, right? To convince each other of the good ideas.
Yep.
And I think that's underutilized. And also the notion, because usually it's, we have this new method, we're going to use it for everything. And so whatever your problem was, Scrum is now the solution, or whatever other framework we're using. And that just doesn't make sense, right?
The golden hammer.
So how do you convince the other people in the organization that it's okay to have teams that are special forces and them not be special forces, because I've certainly seen in organizations, especially if you look at something like the Norton Innovation Lab, it's Nordstrom Innovation Lab, where it created a significant amount of resentment within the organization for this group of people who were special and got to work on special stuff. And they were the innovation team. So what are we? We're
and that's also
logs
because
sitting in the
people
forest not
do
doing
see it
anything.
that way, right? So even in the Netherlands with the Marines, they get the best weapons and the best training, and they get to shoot live rounds more than anybody else. So all the other people who are in the military, they dislike Marines for that reason, right? That they're arrogant and they think they're all that, and they do. They are in fact arrogant and they think they're all that. The key thing though is when you interact, even though that could be true, right? You think we're really awesome, we're doing all the most important work and we're doing it faster than anybody else, and so we totally rock this. It's also really good to be mindful of that's very expensive, and therefore you'd better only use it for something you need to win and win quickly, and then be very respectful, mindful, and also point out the value of the contribution of the rest of the organization. And usually that's forgotten. Usually we come in telling people, yeah, what you've been doing is stupid. You should do this thing called Scrum. You should do it well. And when you're doing it wrong, then I'll tell you you're doing it wrong. And that's why you're not getting the results you need. As opposed to, we have this thing that really works to solve complex problems. You've been struggling with that. Let's create a couple of Scrum teams to help you solve those problems. 90% of your problems are not, in fact, complex. So let's just do some continuous improvement there, and then also highlight that as a success, because usually it's the you're throwing shade on me by becoming this big, huge, awesome beacon of monstrous productivity, and that makes me feel small, as opposed to you're standing next to me and you're explaining why the job that you're doing is going to, in the end, make my life better too. And while you do that, you give me some compliments on how I've been keeping the lights on and making sure that money flows in and that it's actually administered correctly, and that team that does the special stuff is even able to do it. I compare that with I'm in a training organization, and I have this team that makes me that supports me in being able to deliver that. When they wouldn't be there, I would need to do a ton of work myself. But
you're talking to
I
few
know,
entrepreneurs.
yes.
We know how much craft. We know the love that you're able to focus totally on what you do, because you have an entire phalanx of people behind you that look after things like accounting,
Exactly.
marketing, sales,
And
provisioning,
to play that part
catering.
of the politics game well, it doesn't really hurt. Actually, it only helps. When I say that out loud, I give the people that help me do that compliments. I make sure they feel appreciated, so that whenever I need something special, they think, yeah, let's get him that something special thing. As opposed to, yeah, there you have him again, whining, right? Prima donna trainer. Some people will do that, of course, because yes, I am a whiny prima donna trainer. But well, it's a bad example because they're actually right when they say that. But you get the gist, right? So sometimes just showing genuine appreciation and praise for anyone who contributes in any way, shape, or form, that's of crucial importance. And that's also part of playing politics, right? So it's the winningest strategy of all of playing nice.
And that sharing the glory and reminding people that, look, I can only do what I do because you do what you do. I would assert that that's the professional part of being a professional Scrum trainer. And to tying it back to the political bit, understanding, like I remember there's an organization I worked with where they we ended up having an argument. They said, oh, you don't work as many days as other people. And I'm like, no, but I bring more money into the business than everyone else. And they're like, oh, we looking at that metric, and I'm like, what other metric do you want to look at in business?
Still, the way you say that, it's almost designed to piss people off.
Well, it was the end of the relationship with that organization. There wasn't a mutual acceptance of each other's contributions.
Yep.
So I think that's being able. I think Churchill said it best. The art of good leadership is being able to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the journey. And I think this is realpolitik. Like realpolitik at work means that you're able to pull the limelight on yourself when appropriate and be appropriately humble when necessary. Like, so that when you walk onto the stage to deliver a class or, speak at a conference or do whatever it is, that outward facing stuff, you need to own the stage. But also when you get off the stage and you're working with other people and you show appropriate humility. And if we're coming back to the stack of gold, that's your time to share the currency, right? You should be giving that gold around the organization. Hey, we built this gold. Let's spread it around a bit so that, first of all, your pot's smaller, which means there's going to be less envy. Secondly, you then become a benefactor. That's good politic. Like, that was one of the reasons the Borgias were so successful. Because they did.
Now, in this whole conversation that we've been having so far, there's one thing that truly, truly worries me, freaks me out even, which is the silence of the hinge.
So the hinge is quiet because this is definitely part of engaging with customers and engaging with people that I am not very good at. I find it completely opaque. Opaque's no, that's the opposite one. What's the opaque's the one you can see through?
No, that's transparent. Opaque means it's unclear. It's muddy.
Definitely using the opaque. It's definitely opaque for me, and I think part of that is, it's not one. It's not part of my coping mechanisms for Asperger's, right? So understanding that's probably why I struggle as a land and expand person going into organizations and trying to help them.
Yeah,
I work best as an execution, right? Not that type of execution, the other type, right? We're actually doing stuff, and I'm going to say something that's more than it is, but I don't understand what you guys are talking about, right?
You're making my day now because I never thought I never thought I'd hear you say that ever.
Well, I understand it intellectually, right? But I don't understand how it actually works and the actual mechanics of it. So I already bought that book that Simon mentioned because it's the only book Simon mentioned. Which the Dictators one.
You can also get Jeffrey Pfeffer's book on power. That's a really nice read, and it also it crafts it into simple rules that anyone can follow and understand, and then the flow and the struggle for power becomes really easy to conceptualize, and also to know your part in it, because let's not forget that the thing that we're using now, like computers, that was invented by people with Asperger's. So it's not that this goes towards really appreciating everyone's contribution, and there's true power in the deep knowledge and focus as well. All right, so not everybody should do the power politicking. Actually, you should probably go in just armed with assignment or something, right? So you can do your job, and then somebody else is doing the politicking. That may be the ultimate power move also for agile teams, by the way, because I meet a lot of people that just hate to play the game, right? That they just don't like playing games. And I appreciate that because it allows me to play the game for them. And I love doing that. So it, in a very real sense, that is also just
do what
a
you
way
love,
to divide who's doing what. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love actually doing stuff. I find politics in organizations and in the real world, but I understand maybe that a little bit more. Simon and I talk politics occasionally. We are on very different sides of political ideas, which means we get good debates, right? That's and the nice thing with debates is we understand each other's perspective as well, so we can actually debate with civility, right?
I think that you said something right at the top of the conversation, Laurens, that I think ties into this really clearly. And it also highlights the point Hinch was making up. Because of his Aspies, a lot of the softer or weaker signals are not detectable by somebody with Asperger's. It's part of just the makeup. And I think to play this game of idealistic politics, so not real politic, but ideal politic, so that we're not trying to do the Big Brother Brave New World thing. We're trying to create a better world by living our values in an intentful way. We need to stop broadcasting and start communicating. And I think it's this last 15, 20 years, this explosion of social media, comms platforms, etc. There's a lot more broadcasting. And if we use closed loop communication, the three-way communication where you say, this is the message, and the person says, you said this message. Yes, that's the message I said. That closed loop communication is so effective because it helps us clarify, regardless of people's background. It demonstrates humility. It demonstrates the Scrum values. It enables people of various ways of thinking, neurodiversity, behaviors, styles, etc. And by closing that comms loop, we can maintain everyone focuses on the true north, which is ultimately the purpose of our orgs, etc. And if we can build that in, curiously enough, you have just boosted your political capital because everyone goes, I like talking to that person because they listen to me and they make sure that I am heard. And that's some wonderful political capital.
Yeah, and the key thing there is the most important thing is to just be aware of it and to consciously choose your space in that. And if that's on the sidelines, you'd better vote for somebody, right? So you better support somebody who will then either have your back or who you feel is the least bad option, because as often in politics, that tends to be the only choice that you have. And that
not voting is not an option, right? If you don't vote,
and that's exactly that. That's the completely not wanting to play the game move. That essentially is the same as choosing to lose. You at least have to try to place your bet on somebody who could make it less bad, or ideally somebody who can make it way better. And if that somebody is not there, and you like the idea of doing that, then step in the arena yourself. Just like with everyday politics, and you have that in organizations as well. Again, you have that with a little bit larger groups immediately, and it's just good to realize that, and to not be too idealistic about that, but really just open and honest, and essentially just use transparency there and inspect and adapt. So let's see what works, and whatever works, you just do more of it, and when it doesn't work, you stop doing it.
Who knew that empiricism could actually work in most arenas of complex situations and behavior?
Yeah, it's a nice scrummy conclusion to the debate, not debate, to the discussion we've been having. I'm wondering how many people are still listening now at the 49th minute, because usually in talks like this, people tune out. But if somebody were to be interested, I love to talk about this stuff. I had a blast talking to several of the Agile Manifesto signatories, even about the political economy of Agile transformations, and they had a good laugh about it. They were like, "Oh, you totally took this way too seriously," which I did, yes, and it's still, I think, knowledge that is good for people to have, and to also just start seeing it more as an everyday thing, not a necessarily evil thing. Yes.
So
It's another piece of the puzzle. It's another piece of the puzzle, right?
all right. So we're talking to people who want to be better, Scrum Masters, product owners, Agile coaches, PSTs. What would be your one top tip? Like if you want to get a little bit better, what would be your one recommendation, Laurens?
Visualize the situation that you're in by using social network analysis to map the distribution of power in your part of the organization, so that you can, and essentially this is just me having a very scientific-y way to say, create a map with people on it and how they relate to each other. So who likes who is officially responsible for what, and let's do a systems diagram there so you can see the amplifying and dampening loops, and then also know that what the best way to intervene would be, right? It's the best spots, the best people to talk to get something done. And interestingly, that is almost never the person at the top, the one that is hardest to reach, because everybody's trying to do that. It's usually the person close to them or somewhere else in the hierarchy entirely. And as gamey as that may sound, it is actually fun to do because you get to meet new people, get to talk to them, get to really find out what makes them tick. And all of that is practice in just being good at communicating, way before you even use it for anything vaguely bad. And it's visualizing a diagram like that is a satisfying exercise in and of itself, I found, also with teams. Exactly. Yeah.
So like an influencer map. And if you haven't got time for that, it's the receptionist,
Exactly.
the head of
Yes.
facilities, and the
Yeah,
catering manager.
I've had great success by just giving
They're the
wonderfully expensive tea to secretaries quite consistently, and then whenever I needed a meeting with the top boss, I just asked for it, and you immediately get it because you played that part of the game.
Yep.
Excellent. Any thoughts to finish on, Hinch?
Well, this has been absolutely enlightening for me. Not as enlightening as I'd like. I'm going to have to read some books. Is what's going to happen. To bring a little bit more clarity, just fill in the blanks, right? A little bit more detail into the story, so that I can see how to apply this within the context of other people that I work with, right? That's what I
Cool.
need to do. That's my insight.
Well, that sounds awesome.
It's awesome. Well, I think we're at 54. So thank you very much for hanging out. Like you've stuck with us for nearly an hour. Fair play to you. That's a wrap of this current episode of Agile Actually. Like, subscribe, follow. If there's someone or something that you would like us to talk about, wander through a long rambling discussion, if there's an itch you want to scratch, give us a shout. We'd love some feedback. Let us know where to go next. Look after yourselves, and just remember, what's the smallest change you can do that will help everything you do be a little bit better. And that's Agile, actually.
Yep, actually.